I'm Walter Isaacson of the Aspen Institute, and I'm here with Professor Joseph Ellis, Pulitzer Prize-winning historian, and we've been talking about the Constitution. One of the most important things they figure out in the Constitution is how to have an executive, what we now call the president. Walk me through the process of them figuring out the executive role.
It's a messy process. They spent more time talking about the powers of the executive and what it should be than any other issue. And it keeps coming up, and then it keeps fading away, and they come back at it again. The truth of the matter is there are two real ghosts haunting the banquet. One is slavery, we'll talk about that later. The other is monarchy. Any robust expression of executive authority will appear to most of them to be monarchical.
And they're fearing George III. They just had a revolution.
You know, go back and reread the second two-thirds or the final two-thirds of the Declaration. What kind words do we have about monarchy or government at all, for that matter? So that they're really nervous about creating an office that
has too much power.
And then there's another group. Hamilton is in this group, and Washington is in this group. You've overlearned the lessons of '76. You've eviscerated the executive branch of many of these state governments, and that's not good, and it wouldn't be good at the national level, too. So they eventually spend as much time trying to figure out how to elect and how to impeach a president.
Did they think of having the president elected by the Congress?
Yes. There are 5 or 6 elected by the Senate, elected by the whole Congress, elected by general election by the people.
Yeah, and they came close to that, but they filtered that through an electoral college.
Right. And James Wilson is in favor of popular election of the presidency. He's in favor of one 7-year term.
Right. And you do that, instead of having it elected by the legislature, that would have created more of a parliamentary democracy.
You would have had a parliamentary democracy then if we'd done it by the legislature, which a lot of people wish we had right now.
And, you know, it ends up where you have a case, as we do now and in other times, where the president is of a different party than the people running, say, the House of Representatives.
And we talk about the many reasons for gridlock. That's one of them.
And that is something that they weren't that afraid of. They were actually more afraid of runaway government than having the checks and balances.
They would rather err on the side of being too conservative than on the side of too radical.
Here we are looking at the Article 2 of the Constitution. It says the executive power shall be invested in a president, a term of 4 years, and they'll be elected by sort of the state legislators putting electors to the electoral college, but eventually there's a direct election for the electoral college.
Notice it doesn't say whether he can or cannot be re-elected, but by saying nothing, it presumes that he, at this stage it would be he, can be re-elected. That's controversial. That's controversial.
They kind of assume George Washington's first.
Yes,
right?
Yes. And everybody knows that he's going to be the first president.
And he does us a great favor by stepping down after 2 terms, which is not a usual thing.
Right. They all assumed he would die in office.
Right.
And he wanted not to die in office.
But he sets a precedent by running for 2 terms and then giving over power. So they create this whole structure of a legislature. What in the document particularly strikes you as being important in defining that?
I would say that there's nothing. The president does have a lot of power over foreign policy in this. What power he has over domestic policy is very unclear.
Right.
And it was unclear because they couldn't reach agreement on this, but that the power of the president of the executive branch will get defined less by this document than by what Washington does in his first 2 terms.
Right. And so it says the president shall be the commander-in-chief of the army, and that especially gives him foreign policy powers.
Right.
And then he makes treaties, but with the advice and consent of the Senate.
Now, what did that mean?
What did that mean, Professor?
Washington thought it meant that you had to go to the Senate and present this to them and let them debate it. And so he goes to the Senate. The first treaty that he signs is with the Creek Indians, okay? He goes there, and they don't know what to call them. They don't know where to sit. They say, we're going to send this to a subcommittee. He leaps up and says to Henry Knox, Secretary, this ruins the purpose for me ever coming here. And so he has to come back to get their approval of the Senate, but that's the last time the President of the United States goes to the Senate for advice and consent. From that time forward, it's going to be a written thing.
You know, one of the cool things, what you're saying about this document, is that it's living and breathing. It gets defined by the people who come along. It constrains them, but they get to shape it a bit, right?
Indeed, and it's got little nooks and crannies in it that you don't notice until all of a sudden a certain crisis comes up, and my goodness, they've already thought about that.
You know, even today, we still have this crisis about, way down here in Section 2, it says the power to fill vacancies that may happen during the recess. And we still fight over what does a recess appointment mean?
Every president says it means more than the next one, it seems, but the out party always denies that that's the way it is. Now, I think that the document, especially on the executive branch, is deliberately ambiguous. And when Washington is elected, they don't know what to call him. Like,
Really?
they have a debate, and like Adams says, His Highness, His Majesty.
John Adams.
John Adams, and they make a fool of Adams for saying this.
Yeah, he always gets sort of tarred with the brush of
that's
being
right.
a monarchist
That's
after
right.
that.
That's right.
He kind of was. Ben Franklin thought he was.
No, he's not really. He's for Europe, the constitutional monarchy, not for us. But eventually they say, well, we'll just call it the president. And the president was the word that was used under the Articles. Okay,
Yeah.
but if you think about it, Walter, now you have to erase 200 years of American history from your mind for a second. What does the president do?
He presides. And presiding isn't really that much of
That's
a
right.
job.
That's right. That's right. What will happen is Washington will define it so that it is a symbolic monarchical office and the prime minister at the same time.
That's great. Thank you very much, Professor.